last year in Miami, and I'm from there, and whole crowd was against me, and I was like, what on earth is going on? Like, where did these people come from?
The current Dubai champion, Jessica Pegula, who has competed in front of thunderous audiences on 4 continents, was unable to fall asleep while standing inside her hotel during the 2026 Dubai Championships. This was not due to nerves or match preparation, but rather to the loudness of the crowd outside.
You can hear it from the hotel, you can hear the crowd roaring, especially at night.
Pegula remarked, "You can hear it from the hotel. You can hear the crowd roaring at night. It's incredible." The player those fans were cheering for wasn't in the final. She had already lost. Nevertheless, the noise for Alex Eala was louder than the noise for the tournament winner. Now she's in California, and former ATP professional Chris Eubanks is on live television at Indian Wells.
The way that she's been able to pack stadiums and the way that her country supports her is something special.
Publicly urging the tournament officials to move her to a larger court so that no one is harmed. Subscribe now to remain up to date on this story, as the next 48 hours at Indian Wells will give you something to talk about for years to come.
Yeah, Alex is amazing.
To understand what is happening in California right now, you need to travel back exactly 14 months. January 2025, Alex Eala, 20 years old, ranked world number 147, a name that meant nothing to the mainstream tennis world, a wild-card level player from a country that had never, not once in the WTA's 53-year history, produced a player inside the top 100. That was 14 months ago. By March 31, 2025, she had walked into the Miami Open as a wild card and dismantled 3 Grand Slam champions in sequence. Yelena Ostapenko, the 2016 Roland Garros champion, Madison Keys, the reigning Australian Open champion, and then in the quarterfinals she stood across the net from Iga Swiatek, world number 2, 5 Grand Slam titles, the most dominant player in women's tennis across the previous season. 3 years. Final score, Ayala 6-2, 7-5. The stadium did not just cheer, it transformed. Filipino flags filled every visible row. The sound traveled from Miami to Manila before Swiatek had reached the locker room. What followed across the next 9 months was not a career. It was a chain reaction of firsts that had never existed before in Philippine sports history. First Filipina in the WTF Top 100, first Filipina to win a WTA Tour title, the Guadalajara 125 in September, first Filipina to win a Grand Slam main draw match, first Filipina to break into the top 50.8 separate records, every single one a door that had been locked for 53 years, every single one opened in a single calendar year. By December 2025, Alex Eala was on the cover of Vogue Philippines photographed in a Nike collaboration shoot, her racket wrapped in the national flower of the Philippines. Tennis had become culture, a player had become a symbol, and then came the moment that confirmed what this all meant. And November 2025, Rafael Nadal, 22 Grand Slam titles. Retired from professional tennis since November 2024, man who had not touched a racket in competition for 1 full year walked back onto the practice court at his own academy. Chose one moment to re-engage with a sport he had spent his life building. He chose to practice with Alex Eala. Afterward, he said, 1 year later, it felt great to be back. The man who founded the academy that forged her, the man whose courts her footwork was carved into across 7 years of training, he came back to tennis for her. She arrives at Indian Wells 2026 ranked world number 32. Seeded 31st, the first Filipino ever seeded at a WTA 1000 event. And before she plays a single competitive point, the venue is already bending to accommodate what she brings. But that accommodation, that recognition, did not come freely. The tennis establishment had to be dragged toward it, one catastrophic mistake at a time. The pattern started in January 2026 at the Australian Open. Nyla's first ever Grand Slam main draw match, a historic moment for an entire nation, was scheduled on court 6. Capacity, approximately 1,400 people, venue built for qualifying round matches, a venue sized for players. The tournament did not expect anyone to show up for. Filipino fans queued in lines that stretched across the grounds. Hundreds were locked out. According to multiple reports, the crowds outside Court 6 became so overwhelming that Australian Open officials were forced to issue a public statement. Respected tennis journalist Ben Rothenberg wrote in his Bounces newsletter, "By acclamation of the throngs who waited in vain for a chance to see her on the ludicrously limited stage, 20-year-old Alex Eala of the Philippines was coronated as the most popular player in tennis right now." The institution's response to that coronation, Court 6, then be February 2026, the WTA Tour initially gave Eala unfavorable scheduling slots during the Middle East swing. The backlash was direct and immediate. According to the Tennis Gazette, the WTA Tour eventually made the correct Alex Eala scheduling decision. The word finally in that headline doing all the editorial work needed. Now it is March 2026, Chris Eubanks, on live television on the grounds of Indian Wells, is saying publicly, hopefully, we're able to get her in a big court so everyone is able to stay safe around the grounds. The word safe is not decorative, a T is a warning. T is chapter 3 of the same institutional failure playing out in real time. The evidence of what Alex Eala has built does not live in a spreadsheet. T lives in the accounts of people who watched it happen with their own eyes and could not find adequate words for it. Start with the number. January 2025, world number 147. March 2026, world number 32.14 months. 48 ranking positions climbed, and the same span, she went from a wild card nobody mentioned in draw previews to the subject of a live segment on Tennis Channel from inside the Indian Wells venue before her first match was even scheduled. Put yourself in the position of Jessica Pegula at Miami Point 2025. She is in the semifinals. She is playing at home, in her home state, in front of her home fans. She is ranked inside the top 5, and she walks onto the court and the crowd is not hers. I was in Miami, Pegula said, playing against an American, but the stadium was full of Filipinos. I was like, what on earth is going on? What was the origin of these individuals? Pegula won that match. She advanced to the final, and she still talks about the crowd, not about the win. About the crowd. The army was not built at Indian Wells. It was not built at Dubai. It arrived fully formed from 110 million people who had been waiting. Ace 4. Generations, for exactly this. The Australian Open 2026 confirmed what the army already knew about itself. The queue outside Court 6 became the defining image of Eala's star power, a photograph of institutional blindness and fan-based devotion captured in a single frame. Reddit post showing the overflowing line became one of the most shared images on the tennis internet during the tournament. Ben Rothenberg, one of the most respected voices in the sport, did not call her a prospect or a rising star. He called her the most popular player in tennis. Present tense, full stop. Then came the wait. After Eala lost that match to Alicia Parks in 3 sets on a court that should never have hosted that moment, something dark followed. The same army that had filled the queue and rattled the walls turned on her. Online hate flooded her mentions. 4. Time Grand Slam champion Kim Clijsters addressed it directly on her Love All podcast. When she lost to Alicia Parks at the Australian Open in a close 3-setter, she also got a lot of hate from her fans and from the Philippine world. There's a lot of new things that she's dealing with at such a young age. That is the weight Eala carries that does not appear in a rankings column. The response to that weight was not a statement. It was a schedule. Abu Dhabi quarterfinal, the February 2026, then Doha. Then Dubai, where she defeated Jasmine Paolini, ranked inside the top 6 in the world before beating Sarana Cirstea and reaching the quarterfinals of a WTA 1000 event. She lost to Coco Gauff 0-6, 2-6 in the quarters. The scoreline looked decisive. What actually happened at that match told a different story entirely. Gauff sent a message to Eala's fans after, acknowledging that they had drawn new eyes to the sport, and Pegula, who had just won the tournament, it described standing in her hotel room at night unable to tune out the sound, not the sound of the tournament, the sound of Eala's crowd. BY February 24, 2026, former world number 11 Steve Johnson was on the Nothing Major podcast with John Eisner and Sam Querrey, 3 American ATP professionals with a combined century of professional tennis experience. And someone asked the direct question, is Eala a bigger draw than Irina Sabalenka and Coco Gauff right now? Johnson's answer, yes, dude, it's crazy. He reached for the only recent comparison that fit. João Fonseca, the Brazilian teenager who had electrified the men's circuit the year before, she's having the same effect that Fonseca was having on the men's side last year in Miami, Johnson said, every court. Australia, the court was standing room only. Then Dubai, standing room only. It's massive. Eisner added the commercial dimension that the institution has been slow to understand. I think a lot of people underestimated how big that market is. They finally have a star on the women's side of the game. And Quarry, the plainest of the 3, said, if she wins a slam, it would be one of the biggest things in the world. That conversation happened 9 days ago. She arrived at Indian Wells, where California alone is home to nearly 2 million Filipino Americans. 2 days later, Paul Annacone coached Pete Sampras to 14 Grand Slam titles and Roger Federer to 6 more. Between those 2 men, he holds more Grand Slam coaching credits than anyone in the history of the men's game has. Watched, up close, what it looks like when a player becomes something larger than a tennis result was at Indian Wells this week, on Tennis Channel Live, and when the conversation turned to Alex Eala, he said, she's got a smile that lights up a room. That is not a scout's report. That is a man who has seen 20 Grand Slams won from the coaching box, telling you that what this player carries is not measurable in forehand velocity or serve percentage. The deeper authority stamp, though, belongs to Kim Clijsters. 4 Grand Slam titles, former world number 1, Belgian, no personal, cultural, or nationalistic reason to amplify this story. She looked at what Alex Eala is carrying and reached not for a tennis comparison, but for the most recognizable athlete in American sports history. She has to deal with this life of being like Michael Jordan in the Philippines. I think it's very important for her to be a little bit protected from the craziness that comes with that all. Michael Jordan. That is the ceiling 4-time Grand Slam champion Kim Clijsters placed on a 20-year-old ranked 32nd in the world. And she said it not as hyperbole. She said it as a warning about the pressure. Indian Wells draws approximately 450,000 attendees over 2 weeks. It is the largest tennis venue outside the 4 Grand Slams. Stadium 1 holds 16,000 people. Tournament directors have been hosting this event for decades without once dealing with a scheduling controversy rooted in a player being too popular for the facilities. They are dealing with one now. California's Filipino-American community is the largest concentration of Filipino diaspora on American soil. Nearly 2 million people within driving distance of the Indian Wells Tennis Garden. The same community that has been watching Ayala's journey from number 147, from wild card to seeded player, so from qualifier bubble to the main draw of the premier non-slam event in the sport, finally has a venue close enough to show up in numbers that match the sound they have been making from across the ocean. The scoreboard has not kept up with the story yet. She is seeded 31 st. She is not in the final yet. She has not won a Grand Slam. But the players who have won Grand Slams are the ones being asked about her in press conferences. March 6th, Ayala vs. Diana Yastrozemska in the round of 64, her competitive debut at this event. If she advances, a potential round of 32 rematch with Coco Gauff awaits the same Gauff who handed her a 0-6, 2-6 result in Dubai 6 weeks ago. Then comes Miami in late March, the city where it all started in 2025, where she returns not as an unknown wild card but as a seeded player, defending the run that changed everything. The tennis establishment is still catching up to what it has on its hands. The audience watching this, the people who found her at number 147 and followed every ranking update, has known for a long time. The world is arriving at the conclusion you reached first. The Australian Open loss to Alicia Parks, played in the chaos of Court 6, won by Parks in 3 sets after Eala had taken the first set 6-0. Was Isla's first Grand Slam main draw appearance. Was the match that should have been on a stadium court. Was played in a venue that filled so fast the overflow became a news story. After the loss, Ayala posted on Instagram, 3 weeks of fighting with love and pride has come to an end here in Dubai. And in a later post, she quoted fellow Filipina athlete Sabrina Santamaria directly, "It's a privilege to play in front of people who see themselves in you." She then added, "I couldn't agree more. What a privilege it is to do what you love, with love." She did not address the hate. She addressed the privilege. That is not denial. That is a 20-year-old who understands exactly what she is carrying and chooses, consciously, to carry it with open hands instead of clenched fists. 7 weeks later, she arrived in California as a seeded player at a WTA 1000 event, the first Filipino in history to hold that distinction. There is a sound Jessica Pegula could not sleep through. There is a court Ben Rothenberg called a ludicrously limited stage for the most popular player in tennis. There is a man named Rafael Nadal who walked back into a practice facility after a full year of retirement, picked up a racket, and hit with the player his academy built. There's a ranking column that read number 147 14 months ago and reads number 32 today and has not finished moving. Alex Eala did not just enter the WTA top 32, she activated a diaspora, rewired a scheduling conversation, forced a generational authority figure to invoke Michael Jordan, and built something inside a sport that did not have room for her. Until she made room herself. The institution put her on Court 6, the army showed up for Court 6, and now Chris Eubanks is standing inside Tennis Paradise asking organizers, live, on television, to please give her a court big enough that nobody gets hurt. Indian Wells 2026 has not yet played its defining match. But the question the sport is already asking is the right one. Is this tournament big enough for what she brought with her? Here's a question for everyone watching right now. Will Alex Eala win the Indian Wells title in 2026? Please respond below. If she succeeds, will it be the most memorable event in Philippine sports history? The next chapter at Indian Wells starts on March 6th. If you have been following this story since Miami 2025, since number 147, since the Swiatek upset, since the Court 6Q, you already know that this is the moment the entire arc has been building toward. Subscribe now and stay inside this story, because the next 48 hours at Indian Wells are going to give you something to talk about for years.